Way to put the pressure on, Peter.
No, come on.
Appreciate
man.
it. I am really happy to be here with you guys. I want to say good afternoon, good night. I never know when's the actual threshold of night, afternoon, but thanks for having me. It really is a pleasure. I'm putting my timer here because, if I don't put a timer, you get me talking for a very long time.
Take all the time you want.
And you don't want that. No, you don't want that. My wife tells me you do not want
We can
that.
order breakfast.
But it's really exciting to be here with you because, and I tell people this, right? I did sort of expect Spiritism to give me new perspectives, new ways of looking at life. That was expected. That was a gift that I was looking for. The second gift was all of you. That I was not expecting. The ability to meet new people and make friends that I would otherwise not make if it were not for Spiritism is something that's really blows my mind sometimes. So I'm really thankful to have a chance to be with you, get to know you, and the wonderful work that you guys do here. So thank you for being here. It's really, really great. And thank you for mentioning the book too. And it's not on this topic, so you guys know, but if you are interested, it's called Our Road to Damascus, and it's a exploration of Paul's journey and of transformation, not seen in a religious manner, but more in a spiritual, psychological manner, if that makes sense. So it's a symbolic way of looking at his transformation and seeing how his transformation can also help us. If you are interested, we have them up front, and the proceeds of this book, all of them going to helping Spiritist projects in general. Part of it will stay here with the group tonight, and part of it will go to foster projects of Spiritism in English. So if that's something that maybe you're interested on, I'll be glad to sign for you. It's more expensive if I don't sign it for you, just so you know. But I think it's $15, and you can kind of look up front. You can find it also on Amazon and all other places where books are sold. But thanks for letting me talk a little bit about this, because Paul is near and dear to my heart. All right. So the topic that you guys chosen for tonight is educating the new generation. And I see that a lot of the new generation are here tonight, so that's going to make it really interesting. Thanks for sitting on the first row, guys. Yeah. And if you are perhaps not a parent, or you don't feel like you are in charge of or close to the new generation, don't let that pass you by, because at the end of the day, there are kids of all ages. I think we've met some of those, right? Some of those that may have not grown up. I always say that growing old is mandatory and growing up is optional. And we know that a lot of people out there have not exercised their option, right? But the important thing for us to talk about is this new generation. I think that you might have seen in society, some parents are struggling, trying to understand how to make sense of new kids who think differently, who behave differently. And sometimes we're at odds, right? Or how to handle that, given our backgrounds and so forth. So we hope to talk a little bit about this, adding our spiritual layer on top of this. Because I do think that the Spiritist knowledge of spirituality gives us a lot of context for us to understand why things are the way they are and what we can do to make things better for all of us. Spoiler alert. Educating the new generation has a lot to do with educating ourselves. So, and changing the way we think about the new generation. So we hope to do that a little bit tonight. Let's see if this thing is working. Oh, almost. But my hope too is that we get to see, sometimes it freezes, sometimes, okay, I got it now. My hope is that I don't get to talk for too long, but also leave some time at the end for us to have some sort of conversation if we want to. I may or may not lock the door and not let you leave unless you ask 3 questions. Up in the air, let's find out, right? But anyways, I'm really thankful that you're here tonight, and I hope that that this is the start of a conversation. And that's what my goal for today is, to start a conversation about education and relationships in general, because education has a lot to do with relationships. That goes beyond these walls. If you take some of this with you, wherever you go, I would consider this a success. Obviously, we're going to, broad strokes, some spiritual stuff in there because I think that's a key component of spirituality and of education. But I think you get the meaning. So I hope that this is an ongoing effort that all of us carry with us, whatever it is that we go, right? And how we're going to do that? Well, I'm proposing that we do a simple approach. I hope that we revisit what childhood looks like and what our current educational model looks like. And after we do that, I hope that, I cannot read that, can I? Yeah, maybe contextual. Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you. Consider a spiritual perspective on top of that as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about planetary evolution. You might have heard this term sometimes in the Spiritist Center called planetary transition. We like to sprinkle it everywhere these days. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we can rethink what education is and should do. And that's okay. Thank you. If not, I can try to figure out the computer thing here where it shows in both places. But, and then the last thing, hopefully we'll find some guiding principles and some things that we can take with us and think about as we go through our lives every day. And hopefully our friends in the front row would also get a chance to chime in and tell us what they think as they're going. And why do I like this topic? Why am I doing this? You should probably ask. I just told you about a completely different topic, right? But part of my professional background is in education and in creating innovative ways and building new schools that cater to this new different kind of thinking in California and a little bit nationally as well. So part of my professional life is dedicated to helping schools be really vibrant places for adults and grown-ups. So I'm really thrilled about this topic. We are not going to dive deeply into educational models and so forth because it's not the time. But I do hope that you continue to think about this because it's a core part of who we are. So far, so good? All right. Okay. All right, so where do we start? Well, I think we can all remember what our school or our education process was like. You may remember the classroom, you might remember the smell of crayons, or the teacher that was really amazing, that changed your life, or the teacher that was not so amazing, that also changed your life, right? Because there are those too. And the buildings and the fun times you had and the games and everything else. And that's wonderful because there's one thing we all share in our society is we have experienced some sort of education, right? So we all have some sort of common base to depart from and to think about. Now, it might look different, of course, depending on who you are and where you had your education and what time that took place. But we all have this common base, and that common base is wonderful. Yet, it may also taint us to trying different things. We have a tendency to want to do what we have done before. So hopefully today we can talk a little bit about how things are, but I'm going to ask you to keep an open mind because what we are going to attack might be slightly different than what we experienced as children, right? But what does that mean? What does it mean to be a child, for instance? Well, let's just kind of do a quick idea of what it is to be a child, right? Before the industrial era, before we had coal and steam and all that stuff, we really had a high mortality rate. And people stayed in farms, and children were really seen as small adults. To the point where many times they would not receive a name until like about a month or 2-3 months after they were born, because parents did not know if they were making. So the view of childhood was a rough one, not as nice and kind as it is today, and it was a very economically unstable world, but families lived in larger groups, right? And then the industrial era came, and that is wonderful because we moved to the cities. We had houses, but the family started to get a little bit smaller. The nuclear families became to your family. It wasn't just like extended families. And we also had still stay-at-home mothers. So kids had that social and emotional support more present. Now, fast forward to nowadays, and I think you can expect that the modern family has changed significantly. Now we have an early exposure to society. Kids interact with other kids a lot younger ages. There's social media that makes it really hard for kids, because as they're trying to form their idea of the world and what it is to be them and what their identity is, they feel the pressure from millions of people. And if they do something wrong, maybe somebody will like put a video on YouTube and millions of people may see it, or they want to do something right so that millions of people can't see them. It's a lot of pressure on kids nowadays. And we have working parents most of the time. So a lot of times kids just have to grow up earlier, right? So that's what it is to be a child. Does that make sense? I don't think it's anything, right, fantastic here. But what I do want to talk about is this new generation. I specifically like this guy over here. Look at that wonderful smile. It brings joy to my heart. Why do I say that? I say that because we hear a lot about millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, and it is true. Every generation has different cultural quirks and habits. That's expected. You grow in different places and times, you have that. But what Spiritism really does to us is give us also an interesting spiritual perspective that sometimes it's not present in these conversations. But let's look at things from a physical perspective, and then we look a little bit from a spiritual perspective too. So what challenges do we have nowadays, right, in education, in families in general? Well, there's a new culture. Whatever life we lived, it is certainly different than the one our kids are living. Right? With technology and its modern times, everything is very different. So that's already hard for parents because our kids are not growing in an environment that we grew in. And many times, especially here in this crowd, they might also be growing in a different country than we grew up, which means that there's like a very large separation from our experience as a father or a mother and that of a child when we were young. Right? The world is so very much different. The complex social context right now, there's so many interactions, social media we talked about, and we don't have that nuclear family as strongly as we used to have before. All this changes the way we are approaching kids in many different ways. So that's making it really hard for parents. Parents who also grown up in that context also struggle even more because they didn't have parents present, so it's only natural that they too will struggle with parenting in general. Right? Now, spiritually, this is where I think is really interesting for us to understand too, because it's going to like mix things even more. What do I mean by that? Well, we're in the great melting pot phase of humanity. What does that mean? Well, we know that planets evolve just like people, right? We come through many reincarnations, we grown smarter and wiser and kinder, and so does the planet, evolving in different ways. But we also know that we've been lagging a little bit as a collective on the emotional and kindness factors globally, which means that we are having to speed up a little bit, and that's what we call the planetary transition. The good spirits are saying, you guys have to move forward. We're going to push you. Which means we need to do a couple of things. One is we are going to bring through you some spirits who are a little bit refusing to move along. These are what we're calling hardened spirits for now. It's not a derogatory term. It's just I'm trying to find out how to find the term, right? But they're basically saying, hey, listen, you need to go in there and get on with the program. If you don't, this planet is going to move forward, and you're going to have to repeat the grade somewhere else because the planet needs to move forward. So if you're in 5th grade and you don't do your studies, you might have to stay in 5th grade next year while all your friends move along. Well, here's the same thing. It's basically saying you might have to change schools if you're not doing your homework, right? So you have these spirits coming in who have their last chance to stay with us as we grow. And that makes things a little bit harder. On top of that, to make sure that we also evolve, we have some transfer students coming from different places to help us grow 5th grade into 6th grade. That means we have some smart people coming into our midst, but they're just not used to this school. So they behave a little differently. They act a little differently, and we have to relate them a little differently. And that's hard when you've always been with the same group of people. right? And as we do that, then, we also are blessed by a really smart group of sensitive students who are transferring in or coming back too, who just really want to use this group. So we have a mix of students. It's very diverse spiritually too, right? If we are struggling with diversity on the physical front, we are struggling big time with diversity on the spiritual front. And that makes things complicated because we are used to doing things in one specific way to one specific group of people. And now this is not the case and will continue not to be the case. This is why I was saying in the beginning that is the grown-up people that have to adapt. Because if the spiritual world is seeing fit to sending us these three kinds of people to kind of elevate our planet, in the next 100 years, we're going to see a lot of tribulation, the good spirits tell us, in the planet. But in the next 50 years of that 100, like the second part of that 100 years, the 50 to 100 years, things are going to get better, start to get better. And so this has to happen. And that means that we who want not to repeat our grade and come back here, right, to 6th grade next year, have to also learn not only how to adapt to the situation, but how to prepare ourselves for when we come back. So it's not about making kids learn the way we learned. It's learning how to help them learn in a way that they will understand. Because you might have noticed, they are a little bit less attached to hierarchy. They are a little bit less responding to just 'cause, right? It's a different crowd, 3 different crowds, right? The different crowd doesn't like that to begin with. The second crowd's not used to it. The third crowd is coming to lead us the way. None of these crowds are going to reply well to hierarchy. So it's expected. All right. Are you with me so far? Yeah. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, with that in mind, we can kind of take a new perspective and get one of the great American educators, John Dewey. He says, if we teach children today as we taught them yesterday, we rob them of tomorrow. That's a beautiful philosophical quote. If you've ever been to a library and you've seen those little numbers on a library book, that's the Dewey Digital System, that's this guy, right? But it's a really powerful idea. You can't use tomorrow's methods to teach today's kids. It's not going to help them or us in the future. So what does that mean? Well, let's get some visuals here for people who like them, right? All right, so here it is. Let's do this. So this is what a classroom looked like in the 1900s, early 1900s. Now, if you change the haircuts or not, maybe some of them are coming back into fashion. I might have had this haircut over here when I was little. This could have been a picture of me. If you change the haircuts and the dressing, the shirts, you will probably not land in what a classroom looks like today. The classroom at the time was designed to prepare people for factory work. So it's about structure, order, timeliness, even bells, like beep, time to move, right? All those things were what was done at factories. So you were preparing children to go into the workforce. And that was the workforce of before. Yesterday's Uber and yesterday's cell phone. Right? But the world has changed. And the skills in today's life that are required for a successful career, relationships, are slightly different. So if we continue to do this, I want to bring it back, right? Where people are just working individually and just listening to a teacher, not going to work out. Why is it not going to work out? Because back in that day, the teacher was the authority. They had the knowledge. But once the internet came, you can get information anywhere. So now a kid with a cell phone can in 5 seconds say, teacher, what you said, it's actually not accurate. Because this expert at George Washington University says this. So it's not about access to information, it's about interpretation and knowing how to handle the information. So memorizing dates, not as important as it was before, because now you can just check them. It's about, can you interpret and understand what's happening? Can you collaborate and understand others? So hopefully that's no surprise. And even if you argue that that is today's Uber, and that if you have a job where you're driving people, it might not require a lot of skills, I will push back. Because you have to know the technology, you have to make work the finances, you have to have customer service skills. None of that was required for that. And I'll tell you, we're in the middle of what sometimes is called the fourth industrial revolution. AI, artificial intelligence, which will change all this stuff even faster. So we haven't seen the tip of the iceberg of transformation yet, right? So things that changed the world, the first industrial revolution, steam, factories. Then came the second one, electricity, changed it even more. And then there came the third one, the internet. And now it's this AI thing. It's going to blow some jobs out of perspective, right? So we're in the middle of this transformation, this thing we call planetary transition. It's happening. We just have to go with it. You can't put that genie back into the bottle, right? So what do we do? Then, are you being pessimistic? No, I hope not. But what do we do? Well, we got to think about what education looks like and should really be. And here is the word exducere, which is the source of the word education. It comes from Latin, right? And what does it mean? Exducere. It's two words together. Ex means what? Out. Much like that ex-boyfriend or girlfriend that you want to see out of your life, right? Out. And ducere, oh, wrong arrow. It's to lead out. It's to pull from within. So education is the act of pulling that potential within us. It's not the act of filling up a bucket with water. It's not pouring things into a kid's or an adult mind. It's bringing out what's inside and developing from where we are. And that changes things. That's different from what we have experienced. Many of us have experienced bucket filling. But that's not what it really truly is. And this is the work that we try to do at Spirit Center. Develop our inner pieces, right? But we go a little bit farther out. If it's to lead out, to pull out, it cannot be forced. It has to be coaxed, guided, because we respect free will. So forcing it will not work out well. And I think we're increasingly seeing this. We have to explain the whys we're doing this and why this is a good thing. What's the other one? Well, the out piece. So clearly, the bringing out means that there's a social component to this. Education is not meant just for one individual. There is an application piece that is meant to be lived in a communal context. So in a way, learning really happens when it comes from inside and comes to the outside world to be applied. So we have to deal with the internal stuff, which we have not been prepared to do very well, and know how to apply it in the real world for practical reasons. All right, so how do we do that? What does that mean? Okay. Well, so it means that we have some educational challenges that are fundamentally different than the way that we did our education. What are they? First is personalization. If it means that it comes from the inside out, every inside is different, which means that we have to pay attention to every single kid, and that's hard because we have to adapt to the needs of the child and the spirit. That is fundamentally different from what we experience. We went to a classroom, a teacher spoke, and everybody got the same thing. That worked for most people, but not for all. And it's working for less and less people. Because once a teacher teaches to a whole class, the teacher has to teach either to the bottom or to the middle. Because you can't personalize that. So what does that mean? It means that the concept of teaching will change. Things like this that's happening right now, not that I am a teacher today, are going to be less and less present in the classroom. What's going to happen is this is going to flip. Teachers are going to become coach on the side. They're going to help individual students work through their pieces in the classroom, most likely. And the kids are going to read the content and be exposed to it at home. And they come to the school to be able to do one-on-one or rotational pieces to get help. Because what we did was we went to the school, teacher gave us a lecture, we got the thing, and then we went home and we tried it out at homework. And now it's going to be, you go home, you listen to this talk on YouTube, you read this book, think about it, come to the classroom, we're going to talk about it, you're going to work on it, and I'm going to coach you through the process. Kind of like what we went through in college. It's coming down. It's going to come down to the earlier grades, right? For us, Spiritists, it makes sense because we also know that each person is a spirit with individual needs and histories and backgrounds, which means that we need to pay attention to everybody's individual needs. It's a lot more work. A lot more work. That's hard, right? What else? Well, there's also a greater need for relationships and interactions because the hierarchy of the world, the idea that you stay in a company for 20 years, you get a corner office and a Rolex, it's gone. People would change careers, not jobs, 4 times nowadays, the average is. Before, you used to go to work for one organization, stay there for years, and just kind of wait your turn. Doesn't happen anymore. And also, the world is so more dynamic. You talk to people of all kinds, so you need those skills. And what are those skills? Collaboration and conflict resolution. 2 skills, by the way, I would argue, that are missing from today's world. I say that professionally and spiritually. Hiring people who are good at collaborating and conflict resolution is hard. People are not ready for this because they have not been taught this. We think this idea that going to school is knowing things. We have never been taught how to deal with conflict or how to work together. But what is it that companies and organizations want? People that can work together and figure things out. And what is it that we spiritually want? People who can advocate for themselves and know how to deal with the challenges of the world. And if there's one challenge we're going to have in this world is relationships. We're going to have partners, wives, husbands, cousins, colleagues, partners at work. So collaboration and the people side of things and knowing how to resolve conflict, it's kind of a big deal. In our world today, in our country right now, we have a great polarization politically and of everything else. And if people don't like you, they will try to cancel you. See how I'm hip? I use a hip term. I was trying to be young here, right? But the idea is like they're going to try to shut you up. Say that you don't have a voice. You shouldn't be heard. And that's the opposite of collaboration, of conflict resolution. That is the old way of dealing with things, which is just, let's see who's stronger. Hierarchy. Not going to last. It's going to do a lot of damage to all of us. And sometimes I hear this, but Dan, I don't know about all this stuff that you're telling me. I went through the past, and I think these kids are just snowflakes. And it worked out great for me. And I say, oh, did it? Really? Because we have adults in our society that are full of traumas and challenges. It might have worked out good for you, but on the whole, let's be honest, society could be nicer. I'm just going to call it out there. You may disagree with me. That's very okay, right? But I'm just going to say, we got to let go of these old ideas that what we did is the best way to do it today. It worked for us at that time. It was the best we had then. But now we have different knowledge, different pedagogy, different andragogy, which is the art of teaching adults. We do things differently. We have to. Everything evolves. So do we, right? And so collaboration and conflict resolution and a keen understanding of emotional needs is where the challenges lie nowadays. So how do we do that? Where can we look for educating? Because truth is, we ourselves are not prepared for this kind of approach. We haven't been coached or taught on how to do this. So parents are having to re-educate themselves, and adults are having to consider a different perspective. Some of them don't want to do it, understandable, but they're being dragged, kicked and screaming into this thing, right? So, well, Where can we go? How about we go to somebody we know, trust, and value, and who we also consider to be the greatest spiritual being to ever grace this planet? Jesus. I call him JC sometimes, the older brother. What does JC tell us about things? I think if you remember your New Testament, you might remember that many times people try to flatter him and saying, oh, great one, oh, and he'll say, I'm not good, my Father is good. He would like decline all titles. There is one title that he took on. You call me teacher and Lord, Rabbi, and rightly so, for that is what I am. John 13:13. That's when he's washing people's feet at the end of his passage here, right? So he is a teacher, and he says, I'm a teacher. And when he says things, generally I like to pay attention, right? And so what does that mean about his style of teaching or acting in the world that we can maybe take? Because he has come to give us universal perspectives about everything. Our interpretation of what he does may be old-fashioned at times, because sometimes we inherit that and we don't look it over again and refresh it. But he did some wonderful things, and you might remember this part. Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. I think we all might know this passage, right? You know what I really like? It's what he did not say. Because what he does not say here is, bring the children to me. See the difference? Let them come to me. Don't force them. Get out of the way. Things are going to work out. Don't be the blockage. Don't hinder them. For them, it's the kingdom of heaven. There's something in the children that we need to learn from. Children are good. We are the problem. Right? Because we're like, no, not the children, not right now. First the adults. Then let's have the children come. They're going to sing a song, and then we're going to shush them away. Right? That's not what he's saying. And that's a fundamental shift in our perspective in saying, how can we be more like the children? Is it the openness? Is it the creativity? Is it the desire to interact with others? I mean, have you seen children when they're small? They see other children, they immediately want to interact with them. It's fascinating. Have you seen adults? When they see other people, they immediately do not want to interact with them. Sometimes there are a lot of adults I do not want to interact with. I'll be honest with you. I don't even know if they're adults, but you know what I'm saying? I think we all had these things, right? You might have had one today. Maybe you had an interaction in the parking lot at work, and you're like, I don't need you in my life, right? But the point is, what is it that we need to do to be like that children? What is it that we want to teach our children? So I would ask you, when the children come to you, what do you want them to know or do? What are 2 or 3 things that are the most important things that you think children should be taught? This is the interactive part of our conversation. Courage. Love. Tolerance.
Let's not forget about accountability.
Accountability.
Not to be afraid.
Not to be afraid. I'm going to put that in the courage, afraid pile. Is that what we're teaching them today?
No.
We're lopsided a little bit. Right? It's not fair for us to ask our schools to also teach all these things and everything else, and don't give them ability to do that either. Right? But so what we fundamentally think that we want for our kids is not exactly being front and center in the world. So nobody's really teaching about them. So if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And it's a collective piece too. We need to help each other. It's like a take a village thing. So how do we do that? So what can we do? Well, all right. He also says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Jesus, are you a teacher? Yes, you are. What are you talking about? Teaching them how to do conflict resolution, courage, purpose. Well, Jesus is talking, if we were to reframe that in modern concepts, and you might have heard this term, it's called social emotional learning, sometimes known as SEL. You might have heard this if you have kids in school, or you might have heard it in the news. And this is the process of helping students develop skills to manage their emotions, set positive goals, resolve conflicts nonviolently, and make responsible decisions. Right, so if I went just to kind of come over here, and did this and took the students out, I think we agree that it also worked for grown-ups. I know a lot of people that will benefit from that. So what does that mean? That means that we need to have people understand what they're feeling, how to deal with it. And hence all these softer conversations about feelings, right? Sometimes it's too soft for some. And I understand, because when the pendulum swings and we're trying to learn new things, sometimes we go way over here, way too much. But with time, we are going to find the right balance. But the thing is, in our defense and in our parents' defense, we were not shown how to do this. We learn about feelings generally by observing our parents, who learn about their feelings by observing their parents. And if you think your parents are not sensitive enough to your needs, think about the needs of your parents with their parents. You get me? So a lot of the times, we say, oh, it's my parents' fault. No, it's not. They did their best with what they could. The question is, what are we going to do? Let's take accountability here, to go back to accountability. And how are we going to do things differently? Do I know if what I'm feeling is anger or hatred or annoyance or frustration? What's the difference? Like, what are people perceiving? How am I dealing with their emotions? Am I letting them express their emotions? Sometimes we tell our kids, shh, stop crying. Right? Or the grandma favorite, which is a kid is crying, they rush with an ice cream to stop them to cry. Love ice cream. Really do. I think it's one of the proofs of God's existence. Right? But we also have to acknowledge kids' feeling and let them know that it's okay for them to express their feelings and help them name their feelings. Oh, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling frustrated? Okay. What do you think would make you better? You have to kind of empower them, and we have to empower ourselves. Man, I am frustrated right now. What am I doing? How am I feeling? What caused this? Until you name it, you can't move forward from it because you don't know what you're dealing with. Right? So this desire to kind of name, it's really good for kids too, because once we do that, it reduces violence and aggression. Once you deal with your stuff, you're not going to take it out on other people. Right? Increases academic performance. Because once you feel safe that you're okay, you can then pay attention to what the teacher or the grown-up is actually saying. If kids or people do not feel safe, they will not pay attention cognitively on the content, the intellectual content. And even in workforce today, we call it psychological safety. If you feel like it's a hostile work environment, if you feel threatened, your worry is about, is somebody going to beat me up? Where's the nearest exit? How do I protect myself? It's not about, here's the theory on how this works, right? And builds relationships of trust within a classroom and a community. And when you build a relationship of trust, teams perform better. Kids learn better. So the social emotional stuff, which is really hard for us, comes a lot easier for the kids. Some of them might struggle with their own feelings, because remember, we have the 3 groups. One of those groups might not be super dialed in into their feelings. And one of them might be super dialed into their feelings. And we might not have the tools to kind of really help them through it, because they are way more sponge-like, sensitive to things around them than we are. All right, Dan, move on. You're taking too long. So what does it mean? At the end of the day, a good rule of thumb is make sure people and your kids are seen, known, and valued. What does that mean? Make sure that they know that you're seeing them, that you know who they are, and that you tell them that you care about them. Once you do that, things change in relationships. This is also good for any kind of relationship. There's an old adage that says, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. When you draw that personal connection, they will care about what you say. If you're just telling them what to do and they don't know you, they don't trust you, guess what? So sorry. Not going to happen. Same thing with your employees. Same thing with people you meet randomly. Same thing with workers here in the Spirit Center. Even though the Spirit Center will be a lot easier because people are sort of like pre-baked, right, onto the purpose and everything else. But it's a good a good rule for life. Are people known, seen, and valued? Do they know that you see them, that you value them, that you're there? Sometimes people come into our lives or into the Spiritist group, they sit down, they listen to a lecture, and they leave, and nobody talks to them. Sometimes people come into our lives, we don't even say hello, and they leave. Could have been a missed opportunity. But the point is, you get it, right? This is a fundamental shift that needs to take place on a spiritual level too. Because we have to deal with this people. Because guess what? They are going to be responsible for our education when we come back. So even if you don't agree with the stuff, just pay attention, right? Because we know reincarnation is real. And if they're here now, they're going to be the trustees, the stewardess of our society and our education when we come back, if we make the grade. And all of us are going to make the grade, I'm pretty sure. Right? So there's a reason to pay attention to that too, right? All right then, so wrap this up, man. Bring us home. You're talking there for a while. 35 minutes. So what could we actually do? Well, let's go back and look at the teacher again. That incredible teacher. And I generally use this different picture of Jesus, which was painted by an 8-year-old, Akiani, because I like to challenge this perception of Jesus that we know. Sometimes many of us have this view of a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus in white robes. I'm not quite sure that matches the time and place in which Jesus lived, right? What Jesus looks like is not that important. His message, though, is, right? Much the same way what the spirits, the good spirits look like does not matter to us, but what they say matters. Not their name, not their look. It's what they say that we have to kind of dial in on. But Jesus, the ultimate teacher, always asked questions. He was a teacher by excellence. He didn't assume things. He said, he frequently said, what would you have me do? He knew what the person wanted, but he still made the person vocalize and get it out. And sometimes it's a good thing to do with our kids too. So, what do you need? What do you need to feel better? As opposed to, do you want an ice pack? Right? Have them gather their thoughts and figure out what their needs are. And also, let them tell you, ask them questions. It takes longer. Yes, but that's how you develop something from the inside out. He always spoke to people at their level of understanding. So can you try to build context for people where they are at? Jesus gave us the parable so that we can have the story that even if we didn't understand the moral of it, later on, we can unpack it. To this day, 2,000 years later, we're still unpacking parables. We're beginning to understand, in my opinion, some of the parables. Now we understand reincarnation and spirit communication, for instance. He was great at that. Now, this is one of my favorites, even though it's hard to read here. He always explained what was to come. He wasn't about, just trust me. It's going to be okay, just trust me. He was explaining you all the time. It's important. The Son of Man will come and will do this, and the end of times are coming, and things are going to be different, and there's life after life. So with our kids, it's also important for us to explain the why of things. Don't put your hand in the outlet. Why? Well, because I care about you, and I want you to keep your body safe. It's important that you keep your body safe. And if you put your hand in your outlet or play with knives, you might get hurt. And that would be not good for you, and it would break my heart. That's a different reaction than don't touch there. Explaining why has a surprisingly powerful effect on young minds. You'll be surprised. Especially when you tell them what is the purpose behind it. So if you're telling them, one of the things that I really care about you is that I want to keep you safe, you don't have to explain a lot of situations because they will transfer that knowledge to other areas. So you don't have to say, don't touch the outlet. Don't cross the street without looking 2 ways. Don't go in front of a car, because keeping you safe will help them determine what is safety for them. And you don't have to tell them all the reasons of things that they should not do something. They will start to figure things out. That's also good for us and also good for our workplace. When you give people a vision, people rise to the occasion. Jesus was really good at that. So much so, this is a different talk, but he built a team of 12 people that has revolutionized the world. He didn't write a word. He didn't write a book. But those people that he built that were diverse by nature changed our history. Different conversation. Anyways, he always did it by example too. What he was saying he was doing. That's an important one. I think that kind of like settles in all of us. I think we know what that means, right? But this is one that I like too. He also showed us we live after death and that life is unending. He did spiritual teaching too. We oftentimes portray the Christ as suffering on the way to the cross. I hate that. His message was of love, of happiness. Why do we focus on the hurt and the bloody stuff, right? I think that his greatest message to us was to tell us that we are currently in a physical body, but who we are lasts forever. And the things that we do here and now matter forever. And that we are constantly growing. And all those people that we love, we never lose them. We may not see them, but the people who are not with us physically today are still there. And that should bring some comfort to our lives. And all kind of hearts, little hearts and tall hearts, should be reminded of that. We should let that in a little bit into our hearts. That's the core of the message. No one dies. That's good for us, but think about it. The people you love, they don't go away. And as we get a little bit more thoughtful about this and understand that there is reincarnation, we start to do some math and say, oh my goodness, I have lived before. That means that the people that I have loved before, which may not be the same that are with me here today, continue to love me too. How many lives have you had? 100? 1,000? 1,000,000? Who knows? But in those lives, let's say 100, because it's a small number. And math, not my forte. That you've met 5 people in each life that really, really loved you or that you loved them. And let's say that some of those repeat 50% of the time. If you do my math, 5 times 100 is 500 divided by 2, because they might repeat 50%, 250. There are 250, if you do this calculation, of people who truly love you in ways that you cannot fathom, cheering for you. They might not be incarnated right now, but they are your cheerleading squad on the other side. They are rooting for you. We're never alone. We're never unloved. Isn't that beautiful? That's a beautiful message that we have to remember and tell our kids too, that they're known, seen, and valued, that we love them, that they can talk to us, that things are going to be okay because we are eternal, and we should work on things that make us understand the whole education piece and life in general from a bigger perspective. When we tell the bigger perspective story, it stays with them. To know that they will be forever loved by their parents, by their grandparents, by their uncles and aunts. Say that all the time. Take the edge of this hard world out for them. If we don't do them while they're young, they will struggle when they're older. We struggle with that. We forget we are loved. So let's do that to ourselves too. And that's how we educate a new generation. These are some considerations for us because we too will be the new generation in the future. So I think to sum it all up, what is asked of us at this point in time is for us to change the way we see life and do it in a way broader perspective that lets us be more encompassing with our kids and with the grown-ups around us. And if everything else fails, go back and look to Jesus, the ultimate teacher, and think about how he handles situations. And I think there's a lot there to impact. That's when I stop talking. I want to thank you for your attention. I think we have a couple of minutes. Yeah? So what did you guys think? Any questions, any comments, any things that you may think differently? All that's justified today.
I got a lot of work to do, Dan. Thanks for that.
Man, I do too. Let's be honest. Al, let's be honest. We all do. No shame on that, right? No shame on that. Hey, and listen, we all are doing our best. Right? Teachers are doing the best. Parents are doing the best, right? Like, hey, we grew up in different times. Nobody's given us a manual for stuff. I wish we had come with a manual. Wouldn't that be great? Right? So this is what we do. We iterate and we change course and we course correct and we help each other. Right? That's what we do. Isn't that what we do spiritually too? Right? Man, you and I, like, I got kings to work out from, right? Right? How they came about, we can discuss. You probably don't want to know, but we got to figure things out, and this is the time to do it. And it's going to make us better too. It's hard, but it's going to make us better.
It's a kind of invitation to be curious again, right?
Yeah.
For the parents, because like we like to have security, and the workbook that we had, it's not working anymore. So not try it out, but just be curious about how can you do things different, and how does that work, right?
Yeah, and hang on to. I love the word curiosity, right? And hang on to those things that you think. Go back to the top, right? Think about the things that you want to teach your kids. Sometimes we get sidetracked, right? I want to teach them discipline, sports. Yes, to all that. But what is the core? If you had one day left in your life, what would you want to tell your kids? Go to the top. Make sure you message the top all the time. It takes, research says, 7 times for you to stick with something that's said to you. Add some more, just to be safe, right? With kids, right? To the point that they're annoyed with you because you tell them you love them, right? Just for who they are. Did you guys know your parents love you? Yes. Really?
Yes.
All right. In that case, I won't tell you that your parents love you because you know they love you already, right?
That's actually true.
Yes, it is true. Thank you. It is very true. And when you grow up, you're going to realize that even more. So hang on to that. When you're no longer 21, because I think you're like going on 21 right now, no? No? Okay. All right. And that's Mom. Going 21? No, we're doing okay still. Okay. Yeah. When you're 40...
They asked me at the school, like, I think it's a little thing, but for a moment I think I'm talking to a 30 years old. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
We can tell
They think differently.
they push our buttons every day.
Mm-hmm. And I have a 4-year-old and I have a 9-year-old. They're very different animals. My 9-year-old, sometimes I'm like, how can you be 9 only? Right? And my 4-year-old, sometimes, oh, I know you're 4. Right? So, but it's just a beautiful thing. We necessarily grow in the process. There's so much for us to learn.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're writing your new book about education, about this topic, because it's awesome. I think it will help a lot of us parents, to navigate through this.
I don't have that planned. Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of good stuff out there. But we can maybe do some articles and some things, right? But
you can give us some resources,
yeah.
that you
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in general, and whenever you look at like social emotional learning in general, and just parent education on that sense, because it's hard for us to tell our kids about emotions when we don't have it, right? So I grew up in a household that was very loving, but my parents and my mother and my father didn't really openly said, "I love you." I knew, but sometimes I didn't, because teenager hormones. Right? All that kind of stuff. But I'm very fortunate because they expressed it. Right? But I got lucky. Let's make sure our kids don't have to be lucky. Let's tell them. And you don't have to tell them just to your kids. You can do it in a non-creepy way. Right? You totally can. It takes practice. Right? Right? So, but that's difficult. Sometimes it's difficult for us, like to come out, right? I love you. I love you. right? It doesn't come. It feels like soft and squishy, like right? But the kids know. They feel it.
I'm hearing a lot of tips, great ideas for the parents, Dan, but what advice do you have for the young ones in the house to help them a little bit to cooperate and collaborate?
Yes, I think that the tip for the young ones is that you would do well if you think about the role of your father and your mother in your life. Their job is not to do things for you, is to keep you safe and prepare you for the world. That means that sometimes they will tell you not to do things because that's what's best for you. Their job is not to give you things and not to tell you that you are the best in the world, even though you kind of are. Their job is to keep you safe and prepare you for the world. And sometimes that means telling you no and doing different things. It's like launching a rocket. You build a rocket, you put all the pieces, you plan everything as much as you can. But then when the rocket takes off, the rocket flies. And you're down here, you're Houston. And you just say, you're going the right way. It's all on you now. Let me know when you land. Right? So fatherhood and parenthood and motherhood is a lot like that. We grow humans. We are teaching young adults, because children are spirits too. So you guys, as you guys are growing, understand that it's your job to keep yourself safe, it's your job for your parents to keep you safe, and to give you the chances for you to grow your awesomeness in whichever way you can. And that might mean that it's different than what your parents did before, and that's okay. If your parents love to play soccer, it's okay for you not to play soccer if that's not what you want to do. But you got to talk to them about it. You got to tell them the reasons why. And you have to listen. And sometimes there will be really good reasons for you to do something. You might not like it, like brushing your teeth. Who likes brushing their teeth here? Not even adults like it. But you got to do it, right? Sometimes we have like emotional brushing of teeth and spiritual brushing. There's things you got to do. You got to be responsible. You have to know how to, follow up on the things that you said you're going to do. If you say something, you got to do it. Or you have to talk to people about it. If you're feeling mad, talk to your parents, explain why. Figure things out. Talk it out. So I hope that's maybe an actionable thing that we can kind of do to have that conversation. Because one thing that I know, you might not believe this, kids. You might not believe this. It's a secret. I'm going to tell you. But the adults were kids once too. I know. Right? Seems like not possible, right? But we're all kids too. And we did different things. So sometimes they tell you stuff because they actually been through it. They might not be really good at the communication thing just yet, but you can help them, right? Ask them, how was it when you were a child? Dad, mom, what did you do? How was it for grandma? Give them perspective. Have that conversation. And they are your biggest coaches and fans, trust me, right? So even when they say no, this is really hard for parents nowadays, right? Because saying no is hard for parents sometimes because we want to please. But sometimes the best way is say no.
Sometimes as adults should remember a little bit from what our good things that our parents tried to teach us, and because we forget when we become parents what has been taught to us that was significant. I mean, there was something that my father taught me. Said, take some responsibility and don't be a spectator, be a protagonist in your life, whatever you're going to do.
These are great values for us to teach our children.
That's the only thing that I really
stuck with you. Yeah.
Stuck me from what you said.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful point. I think we need to acknowledge too, right? Parents did their best and have wonderful things to share with us. And for the kids in the house, I think we all grown-ups go through an interesting cycle. And they do this. When they're young, children love their parents. When you get to be a teenager, you start questioning your parents. Are they really that good? Do they really know what they're doing? Right? The good thing is if you can hire a teenager, it's a great deal because they know everything. This is when you should hire people, when they're teenagers, because they know everything, right? Solves all the problems, save a buck, right? But after you grow up a little bit and you start having your family, you realize how awesome your parents were, right? Because you stop idealizing them and you see them as human beings who are doing amazing things. So it's great for you to remember the great things that they've done and how hard it was for them. But acknowledging that, keep that in your heart and make space for the fact that your children might need something different. Right?
And we get time for one more question.
Yeah.
Dan, if there's
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm probably talking too much.
No, you're not. You're not. It's all great.
Looking for a workshop on.
So I have a question for you. So one of the challenges educating this new generation is with all the technology and everything that's so involved. The importance to, and the challenge for the parents to bring the understanding about spirituality into the family and also to their lives. You know, any tips you can offer that at least for the parents?
Yeah.
Besides just bringing them to the Spirit Center. Right?
Yeah, so it's lovely to bring parents, kids to the Spirit Center. Lovely. But I'm going to break it to you. You might not like this. It's not the Spirit Center's responsibility to educate your kids, or school for that matter, right? If you are not talking about spirituality from early on with them at home, and you are the first teacher, I don't know that somebody else will do a better job. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect. You can even talk about the fact that you don't know very well how to talk about this, but it's important to you and explain why, and that goes a long way. You'll be surprised, but authenticity with kids goes a very long way. And when you tell them something like, I don't know exactly, you're also giving them permission to not know things and understand they don't have to be perfect. Because they think their parents know everything, and parents do not. But when you say, I don't know about that, let's figure it out. Kids start to learn that it's okay not to know that. We'll figure things out, right? So the thing is one thing. Another one is technology is here to stay. So put limits. Put limits on technology. When they're really little, it's not good for their eyes to begin with, right? The eyes are not there yet. So put limits on the interactions on technology. If kids can play together, if adults can be together talking in the same room, there's no need for playing video games or iPads. Go cut a car box. Go build Legos. Legos are awesome. Right? I mean, I like Legos. So, think about the human interaction, the collaboration. What is it that you want to teach your kid? If conflict resolution and collaboration are important, then that has to be human interaction. Right? So have them have more human interactions. Make sure that they're dealing with different people at different ages. Sometimes school does a disfavor to us because it has kids call their teachers by their last name. And it creates a little bit of an emotional distance with an adult, as if an adult is an authority figure. That's okay. But it's also great for kids knowing that they can relate to grown-ups on a first name basis. And that it's okay to have that kind of relationship, right? So have those expose them to relationships and talk to them about stuff. And that's when I shut up. Right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I hope that you continue to follow in the steps of the most amazing teacher of all times when you find yourself struggling. Thanks for having me.